Welcome to our Pytha tutorials. You have now started the first movie in a series of tutorials that will make you familiar with our powerful 3D CAD software, Pytha. We hope you will enjoy them. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us directly or visit the Pytha forum on our website www.pytha.com. As soon as you have installed Pytha, you will see the Pytha icon on your desktop, which you can use to start the software. Double-click on the icon. The Pytha Central will open. I have already opened it here. In the Central, you will find useful functions in the pull-down menus at the top. For example, you can specify the language of the Pytha user interface, and you can manage your Pytha licenses. The Pytha software has a modular structure and consists of various components that are licensed separately. This means that you can configure your individual Pytha solution. Whether you mainly want to create design drawings, visualizations, parts lists, or CNC programs. No matter which application you use Pytha for, most of the work is done in the Pytha modeler. And you start it here, with the Model button. In Model, you first create your 3D models and then derive 2D drawings, sections, parts lists, CNC programs, and so on. Photorealistic visualizations can already be calculated in the Pytha modeler at the touch of a button. But the Pytha module Radiolab goes one step further. In addition to photorealistic images, you can also create real-time visualizations. This means you can walk through your 3D model like in a computer game, and even connect VR glasses such as the Oculus Quest. Another button starts the Pytha Planner. This is a lightweight and very easy-to-use planning software that is based on the Pytha modeler. However, you do not create new 3D models in the planner, but use your individual Pytha libraries. Pytha Planner is therefore a software that your sales team can use to easily design kitchens, bathrooms, exhibition stands, and so on. Now I would like to explain the user interface of the Pytha modeler. To do this, I click on the Model button in the Pytha Central. The Pytha Modeler program window has opened. This is divided into the head bar, which in turn consists of the graphics bar and the icon bar. The main part of the window is the graphics area. This is where your scene, the 3D model, is displayed. At the bottom of the program window is the base bar, with useful project information and project settings. Probably the most important control element of the Pytha program interface is the vertical menu on the right-hand side. This is where you call the commands and tools for editing your scene. I would also like to draw your attention to the title bar of the Pytha program window. This shows the file name of the currently open project and the license that is currently being used to work with Pytha. I also find the small asterisk after the file name very helpful. This shows me that the current status of my project has not yet been saved. As soon as I save the scene, it disappears. Like most Windows programs, Pytha also has pull-down menus at the top of the screen. Here, for example, you will find the File menu, which you can use to save and reload your projects. You can also use the Import command to open files from other CAD programs and exchange data with colleagues who use other software. For example, with Export, you can save your Pytha project so that it can be opened in another computer program. In principle, the pull-down menus contain all the functions that Pytha provides. However, as most commands can be accessed much easier via the vertical menu on the right-hand side and the icons, you will mainly use these. I now use the Open command to load a 3D model that has been saved before. Project files that have been saved from the Pytha modeler always have the file extension PYO. This means in Windows Explorer, this file extension immediately shows us which file is a Pytha project. Here you see the reception area of a dentist's surgery. This is a 3D model that has been designed entirely in Pytha. Once the project has been loaded, it is displayed in axonometric view, in other words, a 3D view. This view is used very frequently in Pytha when designing. We will therefore first familiarize ourselves with the navigation within this view. When working, it is important that you can view and edit the model from all sides. You can therefore adjust the viewing angle at any time using the computer mouse. To do this, I hold down the right mouse button and simply move the mouse in the direction I want to look to. You can also use the mouse wheel to zoom in or out of the scene. This depends on the direction in which you scroll the mouse wheel. What is important here is where the mouse cursor, which is this small arrow, is located when you zoom. For example, if I place the cursor on this X in the drawing and scroll the mouse wheel, I automatically zoom in on this detail. Or in the opposite direction, I zoom away from the detail. If I place the mouse cursor on this seat cushion, Pytha zooms to this detail. Did you know that your mouse wheel is also a button? In Pytha, this middle mouse button is mainly used to confirm inputs. In the views, however, it is used to execute the so-called pan. Simply hold down the middle mouse button and move the mouse in the desired direction. This moves the image detail parallel to the image plane. The viewing angle and zoom level remain unchanged. This function is particularly helpful in large projects. Keep in mind, you use the right and middle mouse buttons and the mouse wheel to find a suitable view of the computer model. For many tasks, a two-dimensional, or in other words, a plane view, is helpful instead of the 3D view as we currently see. For example, you can often place furniture in a room very well if you view the 3D model from the top. For example, like this. The layout of a shelf can usually be best designed in a plane view from the front or from the side. In Pytha, you do not have to steer the camera to find the relevant view, as I have just done. Instead, there are buttons up here in the graphics bar to get to the desired view directly. For example, if I press the XY button, Pytha switches to the top view, which is a floor plan view. If I press the XZ button next to it, I go directly to the front view, and with the YZ button to the side view. This allows me to view my project from all directions at the touch of a button. If you want to switch back to the axonometric view, simply press the AXO button. Alternatively, you can also use the right mouse button if you want to switch from a 2D view to axonometry. To do this, hold down the right mouse button and move the mouse, as you do it when rotating the axonometry. The camera then elegantly glides into the three-dimensional view. By the way, the mouse control that I explained to you earlier for axonometry works identically in the 2D views. This means that if I scroll my mouse wheel in the floor plan, for example, I can also zoom in and out of the scene here. And the same applies here. The software zooms in to the position where the mouse cursor sits. And here too, the middle mouse button moves the image detail. Here is another tip. If you press the button on the graphics bar again, Pytha always zooms the respective view so that all objects in the project are visible. I am currently in XY view and have zoomed in on a detail. If I now press the XY button again, the entire floor plan is visible. You have probably wondered why the buttons that I press in the graphics bar have such strange names: XY, XZ, YZ, and so on. This is because coordinate axes are used in geometry to describe the position of objects in space. The horizontal axis is called the x-axis and is shown in red in Pytha. The vertical axis is called the y-axis and is green, and in 3D views there is also the blue z-axis, which is perpendicular to the other two axes and always indicates the height. The labels on the buttons in the graphics bar indicate which coordinate axes are visible in the respective view. Now, if I rotate the axonometric view in such a way that I am looking at my model from above, as shown before, you will only see the x and y axes. The z-axis disappears because I am looking at it perpendicularly. That means I simply have to press the XY button to get to this view. I turn the viewing angle slightly to the side and press the XY button. As you can see, Pytha jumps exactly to the view shown above. If I need the front view of the model, I would rotate the camera like this. You see the red x-axis horizontally and the blue z-axis vertically. So I press the XZ button to get exactly this 2D view. And it's just the same with the side view. We rotate the camera roughly in the desired direction and see that the Y and Z axes span the desired plane. So I press the YZ button. You have probably already noticed that there are also buttons with a negative sign, so -XZ and -YZ. This is simply because we can view our objects from all sides. In addition to the front view, there is of course also a back view. This corresponds roughly to this camera setting. And you get there with the -XZ button. The YZ button shows a side view from the right, which corresponds to this camera direction. And accordingly, the -YZ button shows a side view from the left. Next to the -YZ button, you find the button 4 views. This divides the graphics area into 4 equal panels and displays the top view, front view, side view, and axonometry in one window. This type of view is not really intended for designing, but rather for printing a 4-panel projection in an easy way. If you place the mouse cursor over one of the panels, you can zoom and pan in this panel independently of the others, as you have learned before. The viewing angle of the axonometry can also be changed. By the way, if you right-click in one of the window panels, a context menu appears. Go to View. There you can select a different view for the respective panel. For example, I can select a perspective view instead of axonometry. Next to the 4 Views button, you find the Axo button. This is short for the word axonometry. You have already become familiar with this view. I used it in my previous explanations. Axonometry is certainly the view that you will use the most for designing in Pytha. Axonometry is a special type of 3-dimensional representation. This is because parallel edges also look parallel. Furthermore, edges that run into the depth of the image are displayed in real length, therefore keep their true length. On the other hand, there is the perspective, which you get using the Persp button. In this type of 3-dimensional view, all edges of the 3D model seem to be aligned to points, the so-called vanishing points. As a result, in perspective view, edges are not parallel and appear foreshortened. For example, if we look at the walls of the 3D model in axonometry, you can see that all edges are perfectly parallel. If we look at the walls in perspective, you can see that the vertical edges in particular converge towards a point somewhere at the bottom and are therefore no longer parallel. Also compare the representation of the window frames. You can also clearly see the foreshortened representation. In axonometry, all 3 window bars appear to have the same length. In perspective, the rear one looks significantly shorter than the front one. As axonometry is very well suited to estimating proportions and checking dimensions, this view is primarily used for designing. The perspective view, on the other hand, corresponds to how we perceive our surroundings. It is similar to human vision and is therefore particularly suitable for photorealistic images. So, long story short, I recommend that you use axonometry for designing and perspective for visualizations. Similar to axonometry, you can also freely adjust the camera in perspective using your computer mouse. However, while in axonometry you always rotate the camera about the center of the window, here you move the camera through the scene, just as if you were walking through your computer model. Simply hold down the right mouse button and move the mouse in the direction in which you want to move the camera. If you move the mouse slightly to the side, you can also make an arc. Use the middle mouse button again to perform a camera pan. In other words, to move the camera parallel to the image plane. You can also tilt the camera to any angle. To do this, hold down the Shift key on your keyboard and use the right mouse button at the same time. If you hold down the Control key on your keyboard and press the right mouse button at the same time, you can rotate the camera about its current point of view. Take your time to familiarize yourself with this navigation. The first few steps will certainly be a little shaky, but with a bit of practice, you will be able to steer the camera safely through your scene. I'll go back to axonometry to explain the other buttons. Next to the Persp button, you find the Zoom button. As soon as I press the button, the function is active. Now I can use the left mouse button to draw a frame that encloses an area of the scene that I want to view in more detail. As soon as the frame is set, Pytha zooms in on the selected detail so that it fills the whole graphics area. As already explained, I can now press the button of the current view again to zoom back to the entire scene. In my case, I press the AXO button again. This also works when I am in one of the plane views. I zoom in on a detail in the XY view by using the Zoom button. As soon as I press the XY button again, Pytha shows me the entire scene. The Previous View button is particularly useful in connection with the zoom. You can use this to go back to the previously displayed view. I can press this button again and again to go back to all the views that I had used before. The other buttons of the graphics bar affect the display mode of your scene. These buttons work as switches. For example, if I press the Edges button, the parts edges of my 3D model are turned off. The button now has a minus sign. This tells me that the function is switched off. As soon as I press the button again, the part edges in my scene become visible again. The switch now shows a small tick. It means the function is switched on. I can use the Solid switch to show or turn off the hidden edges of parts. If the switch is ticked, the objects look solid. If it is set to minus, I can see through the objects. There is also the Shaded button, which you can use to turn on or off the object shading. With the next button, you can show and hide a simple cast shadow on the base plane. This is often useful in the design process, as you can see at a glance whether objects are standing on the floor or floating above. Another useful design aid is the Grid. This function displays evenly distributed grid lines. Imagine the grid as a sheet of squared paper, yet it is only visible in the graphics area and is not printed. The intersections of the grid lines are magnetic, helping you to draw quickly and accurately. You can select the spacing of the grid lines as you need. To do this, open the Settings dialog in the Environment pull-down menu. Here you will find the Grid section and make the proper settings. By the way, this dialog manages all the basic settings of the Pytha modeler. The next button of the graphics bar displays the points of your 3D model as small asterisks. Pytha has very powerful functions to create photorealistic images of your 3D models. Such visualizations only look realistic if you assign the right materials to the parts that describe the physical properties of the 3D elements. You can use this button in the graphics bar to show or hide the materials already assigned to the entire project. The materials remain on the parts when you hide them, they are just no longer displayed. Please do not be surprised that objects are still displayed in green in my example. This color was created with the pens and is therefore not affected by the material switch. The last button on the graphics bar is called More and contains further switches that affect the display mode of the scene. However, these commands are only important once you have familiarized yourself with Pytha. Now that we have learned a lot about the graphics area and the graphics bar of Pytha, I would like to explain the base bar next. On the left-hand side of the base bar, you will find small pull-down menus with which you can change project settings. Use the menu on the far left to set the unit that you want to use for the project. You can design in Pytha in millimeters, centimeters, meters, and inches. I will be working in millimeters in my tutorial videos, but of course you can set your preferred unit here. Usually you select the unit in which you want to design at the start of the project. However, the setting can be changed at any time. Pytha resizes the project accordingly. Next to the unit setting, you can select the scale of your project. The value set here is meaningless while you are working on the 3D model. You simply always enter the real dimensions when designing, regardless of what is entered here. Only when you want to print out views of your 3D model on a sheet of paper, you will select the scale that you need. These three pull-down menus affect the properties of the parts that you will model next. This means that you first set the desired attributes here and then create the new part. This part then automatically will get the selected attributes. Of course, these properties can also be changed later. Use this pull-down menu to set the layer where new parts will lie. Use this to select a suitable pen, and this to select the line type. The right-hand side of the base bar shows useful figures about the open project, which give information about the project size. This field shows us that the current project contains 3,372 parts. As each Pytha scene consists of faces, edges, and points, their numbers are also displayed here. The rightmost field tells me how many groups there are in my project. Finally, I would like to explain how commands are called in Pytha. In principle, there are various ways to do this. However, I would only like to introduce you to the most common one now. You will get to know the others in the following tutorials. You will see numerous buttons on the right-hand side of the program window. We call these the vertical menu. Here you will find all the important Pytha commands. At the moment, we are in the main menu. We can see this from the title Main. This is the top level of the vertical menu. Further menus can be opened from here, which in turn contain sub-menus and the respective commands. Click the left mouse button to open the respective menu. I have just opened the Part Tools 1 menu. Again, the title tells you where you are. The Part Tools 1 menu contains commands such as delete, move, copy, and so on, which I can start directly by left-clicking. You will also see buttons with a small triangle in front of the word. This indicates that this is not a command, but a jump to a submenu where we can find further commands. The top buttons of the menu are always reserved for navigation in the vertical menu. They can be used to quickly switch to another menu. Here, for example, to the Parts menu or to the Part Tools 2 menu. And at the very top, you will always find the Main button, which takes you back to the main menu. That means to the top menu level. The buttons of the icon bar give us another way to jump to the vertical menu. If I place my mouse cursor on this icon, for example, the small info hint tells you that this means the Edges menu. In the vertical menu, I also find a button called Edges, which has exactly the same little picture as the button on the icon bar. It makes no difference whether you press the Edges button in the icon bar or in the vertical menu. In both cases, the identical Edges menu appears in the vertical menu. Hover the mouse cursor over the icons. A small hint tells you that the first button opens the Parts menu, the second the Faces menu, then the Edges menu, then the Points menu. And in the vertical menu, you will also see the Parts, Faces, Edges, and Points buttons in sequence, each with the same small symbol as the icons. This means you can use the Pytha icons to quickly open new vertical menus. This means you can easily jump between menus. The icons on the right-hand side are an exception. These do not open new menus in the vertical menu, but start commands directly. These are functions that are very often needed during work. We will explain how these buttons work in the following tutorials. Now that you have become familiar with the Pytha user interface, we can start drawing the first objects. The first thing I want to do is start a new project. I use the command New in the File menu. This command closes the currently open project and creates a new empty Pytha project for us. To check this, we can look at the info bar and see that there are 0 parts, 0 faces, and so on. That means the project is really empty. And we'll continue with this empty project in the next tutorial, where we will learn how to create a block in Pytha.